Hi, and welcome to Unicom's webinar on ChatOps. Our presenter today is Jason Hand, our DevOps evangelist for VictorOps. And as the author of ChatOps for Dummies, he is best positioned to speak about this new and powerful way for teams to collaborate, share, and manage infrastructure, code, and information more efficiently. I just hand you over to Jason now to tell us about how to get these things done with ChatOps.
All right, thank you very much for the intro. I am Jason Hand, and I am the VictorOps DevOps evangelist, and you are here to learn more about ChatOps. And most of this is sort of just a preview, a real quick crash course to get you up to speed on what exactly ChatOps is. Leading into the event in Chicago coming up in September, on September 17th, I'll be giving a talk called ChatOps, the New Interface of DevOps, which will be on, like I said, September 17th at the Congress Plaza Hotel. This is part of the Unicom conference's Next Generation DevOps. So with that said, let's just sort of get started here. Also, I will say that at any point, if you have any questions, there is a field for you to enter in a question, and we will cover those at the end. I'll do a little Q&A at the very end, and so feel free to ask any questions, and we'll address those when we get to that point. You know a little bit about me. I'm Jason Hand on Twitter. Feel free to, either during this webinar or afterwards, to send me a note on Twitter. I'd love to engage with you there and have a discussion about any questions you may have or thoughts or concerns. If you don't want to make it public and put it out on Twitter, by all means send me an email to jason@victorops.com, and we can talk more about that there. So here is our agenda for this webinar. And real quick, I'm going to give you just a little bit of an intro on what ChatOps is and something in terms of its origins. We'll talk about some of the core and key tools that you'll need to begin implementing ChatOps within your teams. We'll go through some of the key and the biggest benefits that you'll gain from adapting these types of procedures and processes. I'll show you a few examples on some things that you could be doing within your team and your organization. And then last, we'll go over some of the limitations and concerns, and I'll show you a few things and a few tips that I've come across in terms of sort of getting things started within your team or within your company. So first of all, what I'd like for you to do as we begin going through this webinar is I want you to think about something that you do every single day. And this can be something that you're going to be doing or that you currently do over and over again. And I want you to think, is this something that maybe you could automate, something that you could have a bot take care of for you? So just be thinking about that, and I think we'll come back to that in a little bit, but this will help sort of get the gears turning in terms of some really powerful things you could be doing from within chat with the power of a bot, or maybe even just third-party integrations into your chat client. But regardless, we want to start thinking about how we can automate some of the stuff that you do over and over again. So ChatOps, the term ChatOps anyway, actually originated out of GitHub. So the ops team within GitHub, which I'm guessing many of you are familiar with, it's version control kind of as a service. But GitHub back in 2010 started implementing this thing that they coined ChatOps, and it was just a way for them to sort of move tools into their chat. There's a guy named Jesse Newland, and if you do any kind of searches specifically on YouTube, you'll probably find some of Jesse's talks, and he has a really great quote there. He just says, putting tools in the middle of the conversation. I think that's really a great way to sort of sum up ChatOps. So we're already kind of in chat, sharing thoughts, sharing ideas about what we're doing and what we're seeing, and now we have the power and the ability to actually move some of the tools that we use directly into the conversation, which adds to the context. So that's a little bit of a history about where that term came from. And of course, out of GitHub also came Qbot. So Qbot is a chat bot, and we'll talk more about Qbot as well as a few other bots here in a moment. But Qbot is essentially just an application written on Node.js, and we'll use CoffeeScripts, which are just more or less JavaScripts, in order to sort of tell our bot what it is that we'd like to do. And we'll talk more about that in depth here in just a little bit. So I need to speak just a little bit about DevOps in order to kind of familiarize yourself with some of the things that we're talking about here. And to a lot of people, they're familiar with DevOps, but maybe they've heard a lot of different explanations or had it sort of described to them in a number of different ways. The way I typically describe DevOps is simply using this acronym of CAMS. So to a lot of people, it can be simplified to something as simple as creating a culture of automation, measurement, and sharing. And we're not going to go too much into sort of the beef or the meat of DevOps, but it is something I wanted to at least share here early on, because a lot of this has to do with why ChatOps has become sort of so important and a method and a process that a lot of teams have started to adapt here recently. So a lot of it is that automation, and of course the sharing piece as well, and we'll be showing how the measurement piece kind of falls into that as well. So anyway, this is just sort of adding on to that. To move fast and maintain stability, it's important to have this culture of automation, measurement, and sharing. So that's why a lot of teams have started really just adopting DevOps in general. So let's talk about some of the tools that you're going to need to get started with ChatOps. Well, obviously you're going to need a chat client. Now, I'm not really talking about something like Skype or even Google's GChat, and certainly not something where this is really just more of a one-on-one conversation. We're actually talking about more modern chat clients, such as Atlassian's HipChat or Slack, which is very popular, or FlowDoc. And we'll go through some of those a little bit here in a few slides. But the main point that I want to get across and stress to you that you really want to have is a chat client that allows for these rooms that many people from your team can all sort of engage in the same conversation. That's the only way that this stuff really is going to work for you. The next part that you'll need are the bots. Now, you can make an argument that bots aren't 100% necessary, and I'll try to explain a little bit what I mean about that in a little bit. But certainly the bots are going to allow you to leverage a lot more different services and different things that you can be doing internally, because you're going to essentially make this bot act as though it's just another member of your team. And then scripts, I do have a little asterisk here because I use the term scripts, but that really kind of only applies to Hubot. There's a number of other bots out there. One in particular is called Lida, and Lida is written in Ruby, so therefore the instructions that you'll use to tell Lida what to do are actually going to be Ruby gems. So when I say scripts, I'm really just sort of talking about the instructions and sort of the code in terms of what it is that you want these bots to do for you. So these are the three main things that you're going to need to sort of get started here, and let's look a little bit closer at each of those. So in terms of chat, I already mentioned HipChat, Slack, FlowDoc. We've also got Campfire when I was talking about how GitHub kind of got this whole ChatOps movement going. They use, and I think they still use today, the Campfire chat application. And so this is something that people can use in any one of these main and modern chat clients. And there's others out there, but these are definitely the biggest, I'd say the big four. And then there's also people who are implementing ChatOps simply just within an IRC type of a setup. So if you've got IRC running locally within your organization, that's certainly something you can do as well. And then let's take a look at the bots. So the big one that most people are familiar with is Hubot. And Hubot's been around for a number of years. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a Node.js application. It runs coffee scripts. The other one that is really starting to get popularity is the one I mentioned just a minute ago called Lida, and Lida is written in Ruby. You can find Lida just by going to, I believe, lida.io. It's a open source, just like Hubot. And then there's this other one out there for you Python users called, it's actually pronounced R2. So I know it looks like it's R or air, but it's actually pronounced R2. And this is the Python bot. So depending on your preference on what language you like to write code in, this may sort of help you decide which bot is going to be best for you. Now let's talk about the scripts for a moment. Now again, remember, when I use the term scripts, I'm sort of just generalizing here, but these are really just the instructions to tell your bot what it is that you'd like to do. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because really that's going to be kind of unique to your own bot, but also unique to your own situation. And I'll touch base on again a little bit here in a moment, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on the scripts just because it's really not relevant to understanding ChatOps in general. So let's talk about the benefits. This is where you start to see why something like this can be very powerful and very useful for you. One of the first things that you're going to gain from this is sharing. So by moving all these different tools and context and little bits and pieces of what's taking place not only within your team and your day-to-day responsibilities and actions, but all of the teams across your company, all of them putting that context and that information into this shared chat allows for this greater depth in terms of sharing what's going on. And as we saw earlier within that CAMS model of DevOps, sharing is a key component to really adapting these DevOps best practices. The next one that's sort of hand in hand with sharing is this idea of learning. So if I'm a new person who just joined VictorOps, I can immediately jump into our chat channels and I can get caught up to speed on exactly who does what, how they're getting it done. All kinds of great information is constantly pouring into our chat channel, so I'm already from day one learning all kinds of great things, not only just information, but also how to accomplish things that I'm going to be responsible for doing in my day-to-day. I'm able to learn and pick up on just from hanging out within chat. There's certainly an advantage to moving things into chat in terms of speed. If you think about me, let's say hypothetically, as a developer, I'm going to go push some code out to my repository, something like GitHub. I would historically run some sort of a command from my command line that would push that code or commit that code to some sort of branch or some sort of repo online, and I'm going to do that in my just my command line interface in some terminal, and then I'm going to hop over into chat and explain to my team the actions that I just took. However, by moving this sort of like step of pushing code into chat and allowing my bot to actually handle the interaction between GitHub, I'm just going to run my command from within chat as though the chat client was actually my terminal. So I can do what I was going to do, but cut out the step of communicating to my team, which is obviously going to speed things up. So I can show them what I did, I'm sharing what I did, I'm teaching them how to do things, where there's that learning element, but I'm also speeding it up because I've cut out this extra step of me going back and forth between two different tools. And then, of course, you can probably see that there's going to be a little bit of security added to this, and let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, I want to make some sort of change to my database. Historically, I would go into my command line and I would log into, let's say, MySQL and maybe run some sort of command that would either query or update a database. I can certainly make cause trouble, I guess you could say, from command line in my database, but when it comes to allowing your bot to do it, the bot's only going to have certain instructions that it knows how to trigger. So by creating your scripts and giving it only limited power, you add this soft layer of security in there. And then honestly, all of this is just fun. This ChatOps is just sort of this new interface for the way DevOps and teams that are adopting DevOps are getting things done. And honestly, it's fun. Anytime you've got a new interface, it's kind of interesting and challenging, but you also start to see these different benefits, and it just makes the whole experience really fun. So let's talk about sharing just a little bit more. You can kind of think of it in terms of maybe like a multi-user terminal, but essentially everybody on your team, you're able to disseminate knowledge across everybody. And so by moving things into chat, you're kind of creating this situation where people are sharing one command line. And this is going to help with all kinds of learning as well as the sharing aspect. This is a really great quote from James Fryman. James is formerly from GitHub. He now works at StackStorm, where they do a lot of stuff around ChatOps, and James is another champion of the whole ChatOps discussion. He actually wrote the foreword in my book, ChatOps for Dummies, so I encourage you to download that and give it a read. He's got a great comment here, a great quote of, "We're bringing in the work that you're already doing in line with the context and the conversations you're already having." And again, I think that's a great way to sort of describe what ChatOps is. Let's take a look at learning just a little bit deeper. I don't know about you, but I really, really don't like it when I'm sitting at my desk and someone that I need to show them how to do something, they need to sit next to me or stand behind me and sort of watch over my shoulder. I don't know, I get just sort of uncomfortable when people are doing that. But now you can sort of just all share a screen no matter where you are. So everyone is pairing all the time. That's a quote from Jesse Newland over at GitHub. We talked about speed just a minute ago. You can make the argument, well, it's really no faster because actually I can run these things, just out of memory from my command line, or I know how to go into Salesforce, let's say, or some other service, and I know where to find the information. Well, that may be true, but think about how many steps or how many clicks does it take you to actually take that action. So I know for me, we use Salesforce at VictorOps to sort of take care of a lot of different things in terms of customer management. And if I want to go in there and find some sort of answer, I'll eventually find it, but it might take me a few minutes and doing some digging. But now from within chat, I can just ask my bot a question and it'll go out and retrieve that answer for me. And then we talked a little bit about security. We're sort of adding this layer in here where the bot can only run certain commands, and if you type in something wrong, it's not going to know what it is you're trying to accomplish, and it's not going to do anything at all. So you've got this sort of soft layer of security. And then fun, I mentioned how this is a new interface, and of course it's fun to do this kind of stuff, but also there's a lot of scripts out there and things that people have written that are just fun, where you can, for example, you can ask your bot to go out and just retrieve a bunch of pictures of pugs. Everybody seems to love pugs and kittens and all these kind of things. So even though this really doesn't have much to do with your day-to-day business, the fact that you can inject something that's a little bit fun into it is always going to be a benefit. So real quick here, I'm just going to step through an example of sort of an old way that one would get things done. And actually this was very much how things got done within VictorOps before we implemented ChatOps. So this is just sort of a sample communication back and forth via chat. This is me reaching out to Dan, who's an engineer on our team, just asking him if he saw this spike in CPU usage on one of our services. And Dan's going to come back and say, no, hold on, let me go check that. And then he hops back in and says, yeah, I see what's going on. And then I asked Dan, do we think that Mike, who is actually our IT, kind of our lead IT guy, ask him if this is something he may want to take a look at as well. And then Dan, he'll come back and say, yeah, I'm going to take a screenshot and we'll pass that on to Mike. And then I ask, is there anybody else who may want to see this? And then Dan comes back and says he's going to just CC everybody on our DevOps team so that everybody gets all that same information that I noticed a couple of minutes ago. So that's sort of an example. That's a very common, this was, I think, just a conversation that we had going back and forth over GChat a little over a year ago. Let's look at another example of an old method of how we would have conversations within VictorOps. This is me again. I had written just a small piece of code, and I asked Dan, the same Dan, hey, is it, or can I, push my code out there? I'm ready when you are. And then he says, yeah, I'll commit that to the latest branch here in a moment. And then I also, around that same time, we had just hired in a new person. His name is Nick. And I was thinking, well, maybe this is something we should show Nick so that he knows how to do this as well. And Dan comes back and says he'll schedule something on the calendar for that. And then I also realized, well, you know what? There's probably a lot of things that Nick, our new hire, he probably would like to know. So I wonder if there's a better method for this. But Dan writes back and says, well, I've got this wiki that covers most things, but maybe not everything. And he's going to find that and send that over to Nick. Again, this seems like a very common conversation that one might have between two people within GChat or whatever your favorite kind of one-on-one instant messenger chat program would be. And so here you can just sort of see that same conversation over on the left. And I want you to think about who is it that can see this conversation, because this is key. And the fact is, this is just a conversation between Dan and I. So outside of myself and Dan, no one else can see this conversation. And there's a lot of information in here that may be useful to some other people. I want to return to the original question I asked at the beginning of this webinar, and I'm hoping that you've maybe thought about some things that you do in a day-to-day situation that you're doing over and over again. And is that something that maybe you can automate? So by now, I'm kind of hoping that you have a few ideas. But let me give you a couple of examples of some things that you could be doing. Now, a lot of these bullet points are actually just scripts that I found online that people have written and shared. They've made them open sourced. Most of them are related to Qbot, so a lot of these are going to be Qbot scripts. And I'm not going to read all of them out to you, but you can see there's a lot of great things you could be doing. You could be taking servers off and online. You could be looking at different jobs and processes. You could be hooking into different CRMs via API. There's all kinds of really great things that you could be doing, and you can jump right in just using some of the scripts that have been provided out there by the community already. And of course, GitHub coming out of, or I'm sorry, Hubot coming out of GitHub, there's already a couple different things that a lot of people, especially on the development side, are using with GitHub. This is an example script. It may be hard to read on your screens, and I'm certainly not going to go through each line by line, but this is essentially just a script that hooks into GitHub so that you can go and retrieve a couple different things, and here are the commands that you would run. So if my bot was named Hubot, and just as a side note here, you can name your bot anything you'd like once you've installed it to your local VM or wherever it is that you'd like to host this bot. But for example, I've named my bot Hubot, and I've asked it to give me a status, and it's going to return the current system status and timestamp. And the same thing goes for just like the last status as well as the last messages. So those are the 3 commands that are available just from this particular script here. And there's all kinds of things outside of this that you could be doing outside of this particular script, but I wanted to show you just a really, really basic script and something that you could be doing almost immediately in terms of interacting with GitHub. And here's just sort of an example. I type within my chat client, I say Hubot GitHub status, and then Hubot comes back and gives me pretty much the exact same thing that I would see in my terminal or within my command line, but he's thrown it into our chat. And so I get the same exact information by asking it almost the same way, but I've also shared this information with other people so they know that this new file is out there as of 116 seconds ago, but I've also taught others how to check the status so that they can do that in the future as well. So here's a sort of a new and improved method for the same type of conversation. And what we're doing here is, if you can sort of understand my visual representation here, is I've got that same conversation, but now it's in a shared room where we've got additional members. We've got Dan, Nick, Mike, Jeff, Doug, Tara. There's a number of other people. These are all part of my development team, and we're all sharing the same conversation. So now everybody's involved. And anybody who's paying attention to this conversation can sort of jump in and add additional context and additional information. One thing that I will say is that when it comes to our management, sometimes they're a little bit hard to adapt, especially some of these very forward-thinking and innovative ways, but they always love graphs. So I've got a few examples here that maybe is going to be a good way to illustrate to your team, especially upper management, this might be something we should look at. So here's a different conversation, and this is something that's actually taking place within a group chat type of scenario. So I'm asking my bot, Hubot, to run a script just called Graphite, which is going to actually pull in some additional information, and I'm passing in some variables here. And what happened was my bot went out into our Graphite service, and it found this graph that gave me the load average for just 1 minute on this one particular host, and it took that graph and it put it right into chat. Now, of course, this graph is available from some other dashboard, or I could log into my Graphite instance or whatever and see that, but by me asking my bot to go get that and put it right into chat, all of a sudden it's added to the conversation. So we're adding context to the conversation, and other people can start to see this as well. So I can reach out, I can ping Dan and say, hey, are you seeing this? And he jumps in and says, yeah, of course he's seeing it. It's within chat. He didn't have to take any extra step to go see that graph or go find that graph. It's already right here. But then what's really interesting is this piece here. This started off as a conversation between just Dan and I, but now Mike just jumped in. He's going to add some extra context. He's letting us know that that was really just a report that he ran, and it's not that big of a deal. It should be fine now. And then the last piece is our new guy that I mentioned earlier, Nick. He chimes in and says, thanks for showing me how to do that. So by me really just doing what I was already doing, I was kind of paying attention to some sort of spike in our load, and I reach out to Dan and ask him if he sees this, and then 2 other people jump in and chime into the conversation. This isn't something that you're going to get if you're using a chat client such as GChat or Skype or something along those lines. You really need to use more of a group chat type of tool. All right, so why is this important? Maybe you're starting to see how this is kind of cool or how this could be useful, but why is this so important? Well, for example, VictorOps is an on-call management, alerting management, incident management type of platform. So for those of you who are on call, some of my ops friends out there, if you're an SRE type of role, VictorOps is for managing incidents and being paged whenever there's a problem. And we feel like ChatOps is perfect for incident management. And the reason is whenever there's an issue, right from within the VictorOps timeline, which can be synced up bidirectionally with either Slack or HipChat, you can get all of this context added right in line with who's being paged about certain types of problems. So maybe, I saw a spike in CPU usage. I can then ask my bot to pull in a graph, and suddenly I've got this great context, which is very, very useful when it comes to dealing with incidents and outages, not only in the middle of the fight, but also later when we get around to doing our post-mortem. We want all of that information in line so we have an accurate story of what took place. Not only that, but exactly what we saw on the previous screen from within our web app on VictorOps, you can also accomplish the exact same thing from within our mobile app. So think about how powerful this is. So let's say I'm out and I'm maybe, I've left the office, I'm on my way home, I'm at the grocery store, but suddenly I get paged that there's a problem. I can just pull out my phone, log into VictorOps, and do all of this exact same stuff. I don't have to connect to some host via maybe a VPN. I don't have to then SSH into a box and remember my credentials. I don't have to then run a command to go look at different things. I can just ask my bot to give me all of that context right within the body of the alert, or right within all of the different bits and pieces about what's taking place with some sort of incident or an outage. And that's really powerful. Being able to do that from your mobile device, from anywhere, as long as you have service or Wi-Fi, that is extremely powerful, especially for those of you who are on call. I'm sure you see the value in that. So how do we get started? Well, first of all, I highly recommend that you do your research, starting with your chat clients. So if you haven't adopted something, some sort of group chat client, such as HipChat, FlowDoc, Slack, I really encourage you to spend some time looking into each of those, understand their differences, and understand how each of those may be useful within your own organization. So do the research on the chat clients, but also do research on the bots themselves. I mentioned the 3 big bots. I would suggest that depending on sort of your level of expertise or your level of comfort with the different frameworks or the different languages, those being Node.js, Ruby, and Python, that may help you sort of understand which bot is going to be best for you. And then once you've done that, go ahead and install the bot. Now you can install the bot out in the cloud for sure on some sort of VM out there and do some tinkering with it and just start to understand how it works. But at some point you're probably going to want to install your bot somewhere in your local network so that you can really lock it down and make sure it's totally secure. I also recommend creating a repo, some sort of repository for all the different scripts that you're going to begin creating, or at least maybe modifying some of the existing ones that are out there. Along with that, take a look at some of the existing scripts that are out there. There's been a lot of contribution to the chatbot community. You're going to find some great Ruby gems for Lida. You're going to find some great Coffee scripts for Hubot. Go and take a look at what's out there and see if you can adopt those and modify them to work within your environment. And then, of course, once you've done that, you're going to feel more comfortable to create your own scripts. Once you've sort of gotten that all set up, what's really worked best for me to get better adoption and sort of get other people going with all this is sort of what I asked you earlier, is what is it you're doing every single day that maybe we can begin looking at to automate? And so go around your team, ask them, what are they doing every day? Is there something that we can automate? Is there something that we can write a script to sort of let our bot handle this, taking this off our plate so that we can go work on other things? How about concerns? Now, all the time I talk about this ChatOps stuff everywhere I go, different conferences and events, and there's definitely concerns out there. Most of them kind of come up around security, but there's also the idea of, well, what about being sort of locked into a third-party system? And Mark Imbriaco, who previously, he's been in a number of companies, but he was also at GitHub for around the same time that this whole ChatOps thing was becoming popular. And he says, they've made all of their commands to be standalone, which totally makes sense. But there's also concerns about securing ChatOps. Is it really that safe to be putting some of our commands and our sort of intellectual property and different bits and pieces of kind of things that we're not really comfortable sharing, putting those out there into a cloud service, especially the chat cloud service. And I will say that that's definitely a real concern. There has been some new pieces that have been added into Hubot in terms of like a middleware to help you actually add connections to LDAP services and that type of thing. So you can really have access control that prevents maybe someone from the front desk being able to push code, but it allows someone from your development team to actually do the things that they need to do. So there are some concerns out there, but I will say most of them, there is some way to address those. Any kind of limitations? I am constantly asking people that have heavily jumped right into this whole ChatOps thing, is there any limitations that you've ever found? And most of the time they say no. The only limitation is just really sitting down and writing the scripts and writing the automation piece. But outside of that, it's just a matter of what your imagination is. So the only limitations there is just your willingness and your ability to sort of imagine the possibilities, I suppose. We're starting to wrap up here, and some of my kind of final notes and final thoughts really are that when you think about it, we've been talking about bots kind of serving us and taking a lot of the tasks that we do day to day sort of off of our plate, allowing us to concentrate on either higher or more important things, or just sort of allow us to sort of tinker on some new projects. And we're finally in that phase. If you're a member of an ops team, for sure. If you're a developer, for sure. But even teams like sales and marketing, being able to allow your bot or a third-party integration within chat go out and retrieve this extra information, that saves you so much time, and it just takes these different things off of your plate so that you can focus on something new and something innovative. So I'm sort of encouraging you to leverage these bots, because this is something we've been looking for quite some time, and it's finally here. A few final tips. I really suggest when you're getting started to keep it small. You want to do mostly passive things, so I don't recommend necessarily that you write a script immediately that can go in and start updating tables within a database. Maybe querying those tables is a little bit of a safer bet. Kind of dip your toe into this whole ChatOps thing easily, and then go from there once you've gotten comfortable. Again, I've said this a number of times, but automate the things that you're doing all of the time. So seek out those things that you're spending a lot of time just doing over and over and over again, and see if you can automate those through scripts. You definitely want to make it safe and develop this confidence among everyone on your team. So make sure that the scripts that you're writing, that they aren't actually going to go and create some sort of problem. So again, that kind of speaks to the whole passive thing. Maybe just querying information or allowing this extra context to be automatically pulled into your conversation is actually the safest place to start. And then last, make it fun. I mean, this new interface towards getting a lot of things done is already pretty fun, but give your bot a name. Come up with some sort of cute, fun name that everybody on your team sort of agrees with, and that starts to allow you to build this character for the bot. And you start thinking of it as though it's another member of your team, and you'll be surprised at how fun and how how much traction you'll start to see with all this stuff. And also, I want you to understand that this really isn't just for the technical teams, although it did come from ops-minded folks, because they were looking for different ways to automate some of the things that they're responsible for. It has certainly been adopted by teams who are not part of the technical team at all. I can tell you within VictorOps, our sales and marketing team are highly leveraging information out of Salesforce that comes into our chat client, which makes it so nice. Every single time somebody signs up for a trial, there'll be something that goes into one of our chat channels saying, hey, we've just got a new sign up. And that, to me, that's really fun. It's encouraging, and it's awesome to see. And it sort of just gives others this idea how powerful it is, and then they start looking for other new and innovative and interesting ways that they can start pulling in extra context, or maybe even running commands from within chat. And last, a lot of this is just trying to get creative. What kind of creative things can you come up with for your bot to do or manage for you? And so, I know many of us, we're part of the technical team, and there's not a lot of room for us to get creative in some cases, but this is a great opportunity for you to sort of put on that creativity hat and come up with some really interesting things that your bot can do for you and your team. And I think we're coming up on the end here. So if you've got any questions, looks like there's a couple of them that have come in. Let me see if I can get to my next slides. Yeah, so before we go into the questions, I would like to sort of encourage you to reach out to me. You can send me an email, you can reach me on Twitter, but I'd like to learn from you. So I'd like to hear from you. Are you doing ChatOps internally in your teams currently? Do you have questions about how, something I maybe glossed over in this webinar or maybe didn't touch on at all? I know we've only got 20 or 30 minutes, so this is a conversation I could be talking about all day long. So I'm sure that I probably glossed over a few things, but I'd like to learn from you. So if you're doing anything that you feel is sort of in the realm of ChatOps, definitely reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. And with that, I think we're near the end here. So let me go ahead and take a look at some of the questions that we have. And if you've got any questions now, go ahead and add those into the questions section. Let's see, I've got a question here from Colin Hammond, and it is, are there any metrics for the reduction in number of people needed to support a system as a result of using ChatOps? That's an interesting question. I don't know that I've ever seen any metrics, but I would say that it's definitely something worth looking into. I don't know that the goal is necessarily a reduction in number of people needed to support a system. It's more so that you're going to create this scenario where you still may have the same number of people, but they're now able to focus on not only just supporting the system, but actually adding new elements to your system and sort of creating new features and all these different things. But you're certainly, due to the benefits of speeding things up and extra people learning and all these different things, you're definitely going to reduce some sort of, I guess, friction or some sort of need for having a large team, because you can do so much more from within chat. A lot of that, it's not going to be right out of the box, but you can certainly get there. Hopefully that answers your question, Colin, but if not, send me an email or hit me up on Twitter and we can discuss that some more. Another question we've got here is, I think we kind of covered this earlier, is are bots completely necessary? And I will say the answer is actually no. You don't necessarily need a bot. Certainly if you're using something like Slack or HipChat, they have a lot of great third-party integrations, so you could go into either one of those services right now, and if you go into their integrations section, you can start turning on services like GitHub, or maybe you're using Jenkins or Jira, and you can start essentially connecting to those outside services so that based on certain triggers, information from those services will begin to flow into chat. And there's really no bot involved at all. It's simply that chat client or that chat service, such as, let's just say Slack, going out and via API calls through RESTful API, it's going out and communicating with that service. So let's just say Jira, for example. It's going out, and whenever there's a change or something that takes place on Jira, it's going to come back and echo that information within chat. So you certainly don't need you don't need a bot to get started, but I will sort of also add to that. At some point, you're probably going to want a bot because you can begin to leverage a lot more APIs that aren't third-party integrations for things like Slack and HipChat, and you're also going to avoid this lock-in. So, right now, HipChat and Slack are sort of the two big popular chat clients out there, but who knows? Maybe in a couple of months, there'll be another tool, there'll be another chat client that everybody's going crazy about. And so by not really locking yourself into a certain chat client and the integrations there, but more so allowing your bot to handle all that, you can take this bot and go to any chat client you want, anytime you want. So you don't necessarily need a bot, but I think eventually you're going to want a bot. And I think that's pretty much all the questions we have. So with that, I think we're pretty good on time. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up here. If you've got any questions, send them over to me at jason at victorops.com. I'm on Twitter. I love talking about all of this stuff. And if you're going to be in Chicago for the Next Generation DevOps, I'm going to be giving another talk on ChatOps. That's not so much it'll be a little bit about the beginner's guide to ChatOps, but also we're going to talk about how it has really become this new interface for a lot of teams who have adopted DevOps to start taking action within their organizations. So thank you again. My name is Jason Hand. I am the DevOps evangelist at VictorOps. VictorOps is trying to make being on call suck less. So if you're interested in hearing more about VictorOps and what we do, it's really great for SREs and on-call management. I'd love to talk with you offline about that as well. So certainly get in touch with me. And with that, I think I'll hand it back over to our hosts. And hopefully I'll see some of you in Chicago on September 17th.
Hi, thank you again for your participation. And we have this presentation recorded, and we'll be getting in touch with you soon to give you the link to listen to it again if you have any other queries. And as Jason said, we have this event on the 17th of September in Chicago, where Jason and will be speaking, and we have a very good lineup of speakers and topics. So we look forward to seeing you there. And thank you, Jason, too. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.